Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it, then let's evaluate together. The Grand Regency Hotel in downtown Chicago glittered like a crown jewel against the night sky, its towering glass facade reflecting the city's amber lights in a kaleidoscope of wealth and promise. Inside, the ballroom buzzed with the kind of energy that only money could buy. Crystal chandeliers dripping from the ceiling, waiters weaving through the crowd with trays of champagne, and the soft hum of a violin quartet threading through the air. The Langston Foundation's annual gala was in full swing, a night where Chicago's elite gathered to pat themselves on the back for their generosity while sipping drinks that cost more than most people's rent. Deja Turner stood near the edge of the room, her fingers fidgeting with the strap of the sapphire blue gown she'd borrowed from her grandmother's closet. The dress hugged her curves in a way that made her feel both powerful and exposed, its shimmering fabric catching the light every time she shifted her weight. At 26, she wasn't new to feeling out of place, but this was a whole other level. Her dark skin stood out against the sea of pale faces, and the whispers she caught weren't subtle. She tugged at the hem, wishing she'd worn something less flashy, something that didn't scream, "Look at me," in a room where she didn't belong. "Stop fussing, baby," Bessie Turner murmured beside her, her voice low and warm, carrying that gravelly edge Deja had loved since she was a kid. Bessie, all of 72, looked regal in a silver-sequined dress that sparkled like she'd walked out of a jazz club in the 60s. Her hair was swept up in a tight bun, gray streaks weaving through like threads of wisdom, and her eyes twinkled with a mischief that hadn't faded with age. "You're acting like they're gonna put you up for auction." Deja let out a nervous laugh, smoothing her hands over her hips. "Feels like it, Granny. I look like I'm crashing some royal wedding or something." "You're my date," Bessie said matter-of-factly, patting Deja's arm with a wrinkled hand adorned with a single gold ring. "And I'm still a member of this damn foundation, whether they remember me or not. So chin up, girl. You belong here more than half these fools." Deja smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She'd only come because Bessie hated showing up to these things alone, and after everything her grandmother had done, raising her single-handedly in a cramped Bronzeville apartment, teaching her to read Langston Hughes before she could tie her shoes, Deja would have worn a paper sack if it made Bessie happy. Still, the air in the ballroom smelled like roses and money, and it made her skin itch. She worked part-time at Ebony Reed's, a little bookstore in the neighborhood, and tutored high school kids to pay the bills. This wasn't her world. She didn't have a trust fund or a last name that opened doors. She was just Deja, and that wasn't enough for a place like this. The crowd shifted, parting like the Red Sea, and that's when she saw him. He stood near the bar, tall and broad-shouldered, his black tuxedo fitting him like it had been stitched onto his frame by angels. His dark hair was tousled just enough to look effortless, and his jawline was sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes, gray, cool, and locked right on her, that made her breath catch. He didn't look away, not even when someone called out to him. "Mr. Pierce!" A nervous-looking man in a too-tight suit hurried over, clutching a glass of whiskey. "Caleb Pierce. Good to see you, sir." Deja's stomach flipped. Caleb Pierce. The name hit her like a freight train. Everyone in Chicago knew who he was. Hell, everyone with a phone and a pulse knew. Millionaire tech mogul, built an app empire from a basement at 22, turned it into billions before 30. The kind of guy who didn't just walk into a room, he owned it. And now he was staring at her like she was the only person in it. "Excuse me," she said quickly to Bessie, her voice tighter than she meant it to be. "I need some air. I'll be right back." Bessie raised a brow, but didn't stop her. "Don't trip over them heels now." Deja slipped through the crowd, her heart pounding against her ribs like it was trying to break free. The heels, borrowed from Tasha, her best friend, clicked against the marble floor as she made her way to the double doors leading to the balcony. The cool night air hit her like a splash of water, washing away the suffocating heat of the ballroom. She gripped the stone railing, her manicured nails digging into the rough surface, and took a deep breath. Chicago sprawled out below her, a glittering mess of lights and noise, the kind of city that swallowed you whole if you let it. She'd been out there maybe 2 minutes when she heard footsteps crunching on the gravel behind her. Her shoulders tensed, but she didn't turn around. "You're not exactly subtle," a deep voice said, smooth as bourbon and twice as dangerous. Deja spun on her heel, and there he was, Caleb Pierce, standing just a few feet away, hands in his pockets like he'd strolled out of a magazine cover and into her night. Up close, he was even more striking, his gray eyes catching the dim light from the ballroom, his presence filling the space like he owned the damn air. "I wasn't trying to be," she said, lifting her chin. She wasn't about to let him see her rattled, no matter how fast her pulse was racing. He smiled faintly, just a flicker at the corner of his mouth. "Good. I like when people don't pretend. Is that what folks usually do round you?" She shot back, crossing her arms over her chest. The move pushed the neckline of her dress lower, and she caught the way his gaze dipped for half a second before snapping back to her face. "All the damn time," he said, stepping closer. Not too close, but enough that she could smell his cologne, something woodsy and expensive, like cedar and smoke. They smile, nod, tell me what they think I want to hear. Gets old. "Well, I ain't people," Deja said, her voice steady despite the way her stomach flipped. "I'm just somebody's granddaughter." He looked at her like she'd missed the point entirely, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I saw you walk in, room full of folks who've been to 100 of these things, and you looked like you actually felt something. That's rare as hell." Deja's brows knitted together. She didn't know what to make of that, didn't know what to make of him. "And what's a big shot like you know about feeling anything?" Caleb let out a low laugh, the sound rolling through the night like thunder. "Not as much as I should, but I'm working on it." She studied him, trying to figure out what his angle was. Guys like him didn't talk to girls like her, not without wanting something. 3 months ago, Jamal had ripped her heart out, cheating with some girl from his job, leaving her to pick up the pieces alone. She'd sworn off men, sworn off feeling anything at all. But here was this white boy in a tux looking at her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. It stirred something in her, something she wasn't ready to name. "Why you out here talking to somebody you don't even know?" she asked, her tone sharp. He stepped closer again, calm as hell, like they weren't strangers standing on a balcony above a city that didn't care. "Because I want to." Her pulse jumped, but she wasn't about to let him see it. Deja forced a polite smile, the kind she used on rude customers at the bookstore. "You know what? I should go find my granny." She turned to leave, her heels clicking against the stone, but his voice stopped her cold. "Wait." She paused, glancing over her shoulder. Caleb hadn't moved, but his eyes were still on her, steady and unreadable. "I'm not playing a game," he said. "I don't do this, chasing people, talking like this, but you walked in and I couldn't look away. I won't pretend I didn't notice you. So if you want to go, I'll let you. But I'd like to see you again. Just once. Coffee, dinner, whatever you want." Deja turned fully now, facing him. "You don't even know my name." "Then tell me." She hesitated, her breath catching in her throat. Something about the way he said it, quiet, certain, made her want to answer. "Deja," she said finally, her voice softer than she meant it to be. "Deja," he repeated, and damn if it didn't sound good coming from him. His smile shifted, less guarded now. "That's beautiful." "I'm still leaving," she said, though her feet didn't move right away. He nodded, hands still in his pockets. "I'll be here a while." She turned and walked back inside, her heart hammering so loud she was sure he could hear it. The ballroom swallowed her up again, the noise and lights crashing over her like a wave. She found Bessie near a table of hors d'oeuvres, the old woman popping a shrimp into her mouth like she owned the place. "You were gone a minute," Bessie said, her lips twitching with a knowing smirk. "What's got you all flushed?" "Don't," Deja warned, sliding into a chair beside her. "Ain't nothing to say." "Mm-hmm," Bessie hummed, chewing thoughtfully. "That man over there staring at you like you're the last piece of pie at the cookout. If he looks any harder, he might burn a hole through that dress." Deja shot her a glare, but she couldn't help glancing back toward the bar. Caleb was still there, leaning against the counter, a glass of something dark in his hand. His eyes found hers across the room, and that damn smile flickered again. She looked away fast, her fingers curling around the edge of the table. "Granny, you're seeing things," she muttered. Bessie chuckled, low and throaty. "Baby, I've seen more in my day than you'll ever know. That one's trouble, mark my words. But he's your trouble now." Deja didn't answer. She reached into her tiny clutch, her fingers brushing against the crumpled edge of Caleb's card. She hadn't thrown it away, not yet. And as the night wore on, with the music swelling and the crowd thinning, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, not just in him, but in her. Back at her apartment in Bronzeville later that night, she kicked off Tasha's heels and flopped onto the worn couch, the springs creaking under her weight. The place was small, peeling paint on the walls, a coffee table littered with books and unpaid bills, but it was hers. She pulled the card from her clutch, staring at the crisp black print. Caleb Pierce, Pierce Ventures. A phone number in elegant script below it. She flipped it between her fingers, her mind racing. Jamal's betrayal still stung, a raw ache she couldn't outrun. 3 months wasn't long enough to heal, not really. But Caleb, his voice, his eyes, the way he'd looked at her like she was more than just a face in the crowd, it stirred something reckless in her. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. "Deja girl, what you doing?" she muttered to herself, tossing the card onto the table. It landed face up, taunting her. She didn't need this, didn't want it, but she didn't throw it away either. Outside, the city hummed its restless song, cars honking, sirens wailing in the distance. Deja leaned her head back, closing her eyes. She could still feel the weight of Caleb's gaze, the heat of his hand brushing her waist, and somewhere deep down, beneath the hurt and the doubt, a tiny voice whispered, "What if?" The bell above the door of ebony reeds gave its usual half-hearted jingle as Deja pushed a stack of used paperbacks onto a shelf near the back. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon in Bronzeville, the kind where the sunlight slanted through the dusty windows just right, painting the old hardwood floors in shades of gold. The air smelled like aged paper and the faint hint of coffee from the pot she'd brewed that morning, still sitting cold on the counter. Nina Simone's voice crooned low from a beat-up speaker in the corner, her smoky tones weaving through the quiet like a lifeline. Deja hummed along, her fingers brushing over the cracked spines of poetry collections. Langston Hughes, Gwendolyn Brooks, names that felt like family. She'd been working the shop alone all day, Miguel off on some errand, and Tasha probably still sleeping off her DJ gig from the night before. It suited her fine. After the gala last Friday, she'd needed the quiet, the routine. Caleb Pierce's card was still sitting on her coffee table at home, untouched but loud as hell in its silence. She hadn't called him, hadn't even thought about it, she told herself. But that was a lie, and she knew it. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those gray eyes, felt the ghost of his hand on her waist. It pissed her off how much space he'd taken up in her head without even trying. The bell jingled again, sharper this time, and she didn't bother looking up. "We're open till 6, she called out, sliding a copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God into place. "Holler if you need me." "Got any first editions back there?" a voice asked, deep and smooth, cutting through Nina's melody like a knife. Deja froze, her hand hovering over the shelf. She knew that voice. Hadn't stopped hearing it in her dreams since the damn gala. Slowly she turned, and there he was. Caleb Pierce, standing just inside the doorway, one hand in the pocket of a gray wool coat, the other trailing along the edge of a shelf piled with dog-eared mysteries. He looked too polished for the little shop, his coat probably worth more than her rent, his dark hair still tousled in that careless way that made her want to mess it up more. But his eyes, those gray, piercing eyes, locked on her like she was the only thing in the room worth seeing. "You're joking," she said, standing up straight and brushing her hands on her jeans. Her braid swung over her shoulder as she crossed her arms, trying to hide the way her heart kicked up a notch. "I'm not." He stepped closer, his boots scuffing the worn floor. "You said you liked quiet places with books. Figured I'd try my luck." Deja's eyes narrowed. "You tracked down where I work?" "Asked your grandma," he said, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "She's a talker when she wants to be." That stopped her short. She could picture Bessie, all sly smiles and sharp wit, spilling the beans to this white boy in a tux like it was nothing. "She gave you this address?" "Told me you'd be here round noon to 4. Didn't say why I was asking." He shrugged like it was the most normal thing in the world. Deja shook her head, a dry laugh escaping her. "Granny's gonna get an earful later." She stepped around the counter, putting it between them like a shield. "So why you here, Caleb Pierce? Ain't you got a company to run or some rich folks to impress?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved toward a shelf near the front, his fingers skimming the titles like he was actually interested. "You said yes to seeing me again," he said finally, glancing over his shoulder. "Didn't want to let that slip away." Her chest tightened. She didn't remember saying yes, not out loud anyway. But she hadn't thrown that card away, hadn't told him to get lost on that balcony. Maybe that was enough for a guy like him. "You thought showing up uninvited while I'm stacking books would be charming?" "Nah," he said, turning to face her fully now. "I thought it'd be real." She should have told him to leave. Should have pointed to the door and gone back to her quiet afternoon, safe behind the counter with her books and her music. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned against the edge of the counter, watching him like he was a puzzle she hadn't figured out yet. "You don't quit, do you?" "Not when it's something I want," he said, his voice dropping low, sending a shiver down her spine she didn't want to admit to. "And what's that?" she asked, her tone sharper than she meant it. "Me? Or whatever it is you see when you look at me." He didn't flinch, but something flickered in his eyes. Something raw, unguarded. "You," he said simply. "Just you." The air in the shop shifted, grew heavy with a tension she couldn't name. Deja's mouth went dry, and she hated how her body betrayed her, how her skin prickled under his gaze. Jamal had left her hollow, a shell of herself picking up pieces he'd scattered. She'd told herself she didn't need anyone, didn't want anyone. But Caleb was standing there, looking at her like she was a damn revelation, and it stirred something reckless in her chest. "Help me with these, then," she said, jerking her chin toward a box of books by the counter. "If you're gonna linger, make yourself useful." He didn't hesitate. He shrugged off his coat, draping it over a chair, and rolled up the sleeves of his white button-down. Deja tried not to notice the way his forearms flexed, the way his shirt pulled tight across his shoulders. She handed him a worn copy of The Bluest Eye, pointing to a shelf in the back. "That goes over there." He took it, his fingers brushing hers for half a second, and she pulled back like she'd been burned. Caleb didn't comment, just walked to the back corner, sliding the book between two others with a care she hadn't expected. They worked like that for a while, moving in a quiet rhythm, her passing books, him shelving them, Nina's voice filling the spaces between. Every now and then their eyes would catch, and she'd look away fast, her stomach flipping like she was a teenager again. "You're good at this," she said after a bit, breaking the silence as he stacked a pile of poetry collections with surprising precision. "Used to work in a library," he said, glancing at her. "Back when I was a broke-ass kid trying to pay for college." She raised a brow. "You? Broke? Hard to believe, huh?" He grinned, a real one this time. Not that polished smirk he'd worn at the gala. "Didn't always have a penthouse and a driver. Took me a while to figure out how to fake it till I made it." Deja snorted, leaning against a shelf. "Guess you faked it pretty damn good." "Guess so," he said, but there was a weight to it, like he wasn't proud of it. He straightened up, wiping his hands on his pants. "What about you? How'd you end up here?" "Always loved books," she said, shrugging. "Granny taught me to read before I could walk, practically. This place, it's home, more than my apartment anyway." He nodded, like he got it. And for a minute they just stood there, the shop wrapping around them like a cocoon. Then he stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat off him, smell that cedar and smoke cologne again. "Deja," he said, her name rolling off his tongue like a prayer. "I didn't expect you to say yes that night. Didn't expect you to look for me." She shot back, her voice quieter now, caught in the pull of him. They were inches apart, the space between them crackling like a live wire. She could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, the faint stubble along his jaw. Her breath hitched, and before she could stop herself, she said, "Come with me." She turned, leading him to the back of the shop, past the counter, and through a rickety door into the storage room. It was a cramped space, shelves bowing under stacks of unsorted books, the air thick with dust and the faint tang of mildew. A single bulb swung overhead, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Deja didn't know why she'd brought him here. Didn't want to think about it too hard. But when she turned to face him, he was right there, closer than he'd been all day. "Deja," he started, but she cut him off, stepping into him, her hands fisting in his shirt. She didn't know who moved first, didn't care. His mouth crashed into hers, hot and hungry, and she kissed him back like she was drowning, and he was air. His hands slid to her waist, pulling her flush against him, and she felt the hard planes of his body through her thin sweater. It escalated fast, too fast. Caleb pushed her back against the wall, the rough wood digging into her spine as his lips trailed down her neck, teeth grazing her skin. Her hands went to his hair, tugging hard, and he groaned against her throat, the sound sending a jolt straight through her. His fingers slipped under her sweater, finding the edge of her bra, and with one swift move, he tore it open, the fabric ripping loud in the quiet room. She gasped, arching into him, and then they were on the floor, a tangle of limbs and heat. Books scattered as they hit the ground, pages fluttering like startled birds. Deja straddled him, her jeans scraping against his thighs, her nails digging into his shoulders as she rocked against him. Caleb's hands gripped her hips, guiding her, his breath ragged as he muttered her name like a curse. It was messy, desperate, a collision of need she hadn't let herself feel since Jamal. She clawed at his shirt, buttons popping, and he yanked her sweater over her head, tossing it into the chaos of fallen books. They moved together, hard and fast, the floor creaking beneath them, her moans mingling with his until the world narrowed to just this, just them. When it was over, they lay there, panting, the bulb overhead swaying like it was judging them. Deja's chest heaved, her skin slick with sweat, and she rolled off him, staring at the ceiling. Reality crashed in like a bucket of cold water. What the hell had she just done? She sat up, grabbing her sweater and pulling it on, not looking at him. "This don't mean shit," she said, her voice rough, shaky. "You hear me?" Caleb propped himself up on an elbow, his shirt hanging open, his hair a mess. "Deja, don't," she snapped, standing up and smoothing her braids back. Her bra was ruined, hanging loose under her sweater, and she crossed her arms to hide it. "You need to go." He didn't argue. He buttoned his shirt, well, what was left of it, and grabbed his coat from the front room. At the door, he paused, looking back at her. "I'll see you again," he said, not a question. She didn't answer, just watched him leave, the bell jingling as the door swung shut. The shop felt too quiet now, Nina's voice a distant echo. Deja sank onto a stool behind the counter, her hands trembling as she pressed them to her face. She'd wanted to feel something, anything, to drown out Jamal's ghost, and she had. God, she had. But it wasn't supposed to be like this, not with him. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out, expecting Tasha. It was a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Tasha. You free tonight? Need to talk?" Deja frowned, typing back. "How'd you get a new number?" "Yeah, come by the shop." A minute later, the reply. "Long story. Be there in 20. She set the phone down, her mind spinning. Tasha always had a knack for showing up when Deja needed her most, and she needed her now, because whatever had just happened with Caleb, it wasn't just a fling, it was a damn mess, and she didn't know how to untangle it. When Tasha walked in, all braids and leather jacket, she took one look at Deja and stopped dead. "Girl, what the hell happened to you? You look like you just ran a marathon." Deja forced a laugh, but it came out brittle. "Something like that." Tasha dropped into a chair, kicking her boots up on a stack of magazines. "Spill it. Now." And that's when it hit her. Tasha didn't know about Caleb yet. Not really. But she'd figure it out soon enough. Deja opened her mouth, then closed it, the weight of what she'd done settling in her chest like a stone. "Later," she said finally. "I'll tell you later." But later came too fast. Tasha's eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward, voice dropping low. "Deja, you're acting weird. What's going on?" Deja sighed, running a hand over her braids. "You remember that gala?" "Yeah, with Bessie. What about it?" "I met somebody," Deja said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I think I just fucked up." Tasha's brows shot up, but before she could press, Deja's phone buzzed again. Another text from that unknown number. "It's not what you think. He lost somebody. Looks like you, from what I hear." Deja stared at the screen, her blood running cold. "Tasha," she said slowly. "Who's this from?" Tasha glanced over, frowning. "Ain't me. I didn't text you that." Deja's stomach dropped. She looked toward the door where Caleb had disappeared, the bell still swaying faintly. Somebody knew. And if Tasha was right, if Caleb had lost someone who looked like her, then what the hell had she just walked into? The fluorescent lights in Deja's tiny Bronzeville apartment buzzed faintly overhead, casting a harsh glow over the chipped formica table where she sat. A plate of cold fried chicken wings sat untouched in front of her, the grease congealing on the paper towel she'd laid out as a makeshift plate. The air smelled like stale coffee and the lavender candle she'd lit earlier, trying to chase away the chaos in her head. It wasn't working. Her phone lay face down next to the chicken, that cryptic text from an unknown number still burning in her mind. "It's not what you think. He lost somebody. Looks like you, from what I hear." Tasha had left the shop an hour ago, after Deja brushed off her questions with a vague, "I'll explain later." She couldn't explain, not yet, not when she didn't even know what she felt. Caleb Pierce had stormed into her life like a damn hurricane, and yesterday in the storage room, she'd let him. She'd wanted him, wanted to feel something other than the hollow ache Jamal had left behind. But now she felt like a fool, tangled up in something she didn't understand. The clock on the wall ticked past 7, its hands creeping toward 8. She should have been at Ebony Reed's, closing up, but she'd called Miguel to cover her shift, claiming a headache. It wasn't a lie. Not entirely. Her head throbbed, a dull pulse behind her eyes, but it wasn't just that. It was the memory of Caleb's hands on her, the way he'd groaned her name like it meant something, and the sinking feeling that maybe it didn't mean what she thought. A sharp knock on the door jolted her out of her spiral. She froze, staring at the peeling paint on the frame like it might tell her who was out there. Another knock, harder this time. "Deja, it's me," a voice called, muffled but unmistakable. Caleb. Her stomach flipped, a mix of dread and something she hated admitting, want. She stood, smoothing her oversized bull's hoodie over her leggings, and padded to the door barefoot. When she cracked it open, there he was, leaning against the frame in a black leather jacket and jeans, his hair damp from the drizzle outside. Those gray eyes locked on her, softer than they'd been yesterday, but still carrying that intensity that made her skin prickle. "What you doing here?" she asked, her voice rough, like she'd been yelling all day. "Can I come in?" he said, not answering her question. His tone was quiet, almost careful. She hesitated, then stepped back, letting the door swing wide. He walked in, his boots leaving faint wet marks on the linoleum, and glanced around, taking in the mismatched furniture, the stack of books on the coffee table, the faded photo of her and Bessie taped to the fridge. He didn't say anything about it, just turned to her as she shut the door. "I'm sorry," he said, straight out the gate. "Yesterday, I didn't mean to push you like that." Deja crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. "You didn't push me. I was there too." He nodded, running a hand through his wet hair. "Yeah, but I shouldn't have left it like that. You told me to go, and I did, but I couldn't stop thinking about you. About us." "There ain't no us, Caleb," she said, sharper than she meant. That was what it was. A mistake. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small, leather-bound notebook, edges worn like it had been carried around too long. "This was hers," he said, holding it out. "Maya's. I want you to see it." Deja's breath caught. That name, Maya, hit her like a punch. She didn't take the book, just stared at it, then at him. "Who the hell is she? And don't lie to me." "She was my girlfriend," he said, his voice low, steady. 4 years ago she died. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a light, and she was gone. Just like that. Deja's chest tightened, a knot of sympathy mixing with the suspicion she'd been nursing since that text. "And she looked like me." "Yeah," he admitted, meeting her eyes. "She did. Same skin, same fire in her eyes. When I saw you at the gala, it hit me hard. But that's not why I'm here, Deja. It's not why I came to the shop. I see you, not her." She wanted to believe him. God, she did. But the doubt gnawed at her, sharp and relentless. "You sure about that? 'Cause I ain't trying to be nobody's ghost." "You're not," he said, stepping closer, the notebook still in his hand. "You're Deja. You're real, and you're here, and I can't get you out of my head. Not because of her, because of you." Her throat burned, and she blinked hard, refusing to let tears spill. She'd been burned before, Let herself fall for Jamal's sweet talk only to find him with some chick from his office. She couldn't do that again. But Caleb was standing there, raw and open in a way Jamal never had been, and it messed with her. "Come eat with me," he said, breaking the silence. "Tonight, just dinner. No pressure, no bullshit. Let me prove it." She should have said no, should have kicked him out and locked the door, but instead she nodded, a small, shaky movement. "Fine, but I'm picking the spot." His smile was faint, relieved. "Deal." 2 hours later, they were sitting in a corner booth at Harold's Chicken Shack on 47th Street, the air thick with the smell of frying oil and hot sauce. Deja had picked it on purpose, greasy, loud, nothing like the fancy places he probably knew. She wanted to see if he'd flinch, but he didn't. He sat across from her, jacket slung over the back of the booth, digging into a basket of wings like he'd been eating there his whole life. "You're full of surprises," she said, dipping a fry in ranch and popping it into her mouth. "Grew up on the South Side," he said, licking sauce off his thumb. "Before all the money. Harold's was my spot when I was a kid." She raised a brow, skeptical. "You? South Side?" "Hyde Park," he said, grinning. "Not exactly the hood, but close enough to sneak over here for some wings. My mom used to drag me back by my ear when she caught me." Deja laughed, a real one this time, and it felt good, like a weight lifting, just for a second. They talked like that for a while, easy and slow, about nothing and everything. He told her about the first app he built, a dumb little game that made him his first million. She told him about the time Bessie caught her sneaking a boy into the apartment at 16 and chased him out with a broom. The tension from the storage room didn't disappear, but it softened, replaced by something warmer, something she could almost trust. When they stepped outside, the night air was crisp, the street buzzing with cars and laughter from a group of kids down the block. Caleb walked her to her beat-up Honda, parked under a flickering street lamp. He stopped by the driver's side, close enough that she could feel his warmth, but he didn't touch her. "Thanks," he said, his voice low, "for giving me a chance." "Don't thank me yet," she said, but her lips twitched with a smile. "I'm still figuring you out." He nodded, stepping back as she opened the door. "Take your time." She drove home with the windows down, the wind whipping through her braids, and for the first time in months, she felt lighter. Maybe Caleb was different. Maybe she could let herself feel this, just a little. That hope lasted exactly 2 days. Friday morning, she was back at Ebony Reed's, restocking a shelf of kids' books, when the bell jingled. She looked up, expecting Miguel or a regular, but it was Tasha, storming in with a rolled-up magazine in her hand and a look that could have melted steel. "Girl, you need to see this," Tasha said, slamming the magazine on the counter. "Now." Deja frowned, wiping her hands on her apron as she stepped over. The cover of Chicago Pulse stared back at her, a glossy tabloid she'd never bothered with before. But the headline made her blood run cold. "Tech mogul Caleb Pierce's new flame. A rebound from tragedy." Below it, a grainy photo of her and Caleb outside Harold's, his hand brushing her arm as they laughed. Inside, more pictures. Them at the shop, him leaving her apartment. And a sidebar with a photo of a woman, dark skin, sharp eyes, a smile that mirrored Deja's own. Maya Coleman, 1989-2020. Pierce's late girlfriend, lost in a tragic accident. Is his latest romance just a way to heal old wounds? Deja's hands shook as she flipped through the pages, words blurring together. Sources say Pierce has been seen with Turner multiple times, a striking resemblance to Coleman. Rebound or real love? "Tasha, where'd this come from?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Every damn newsstand in the city," Tasha said, crossing her arms. "I told you, Deja. He's stuck in the past, and you're just his rebound. You deserve better than that." "He said it wasn't like that," Deja murmured, but the words felt hollow now, drowned out by the photos staring back at her. Tasha snorted. "Yeah, and I'm sure he meant it, till his ex decided to spill the tea." "His ex?" Deja's head snapped up. "Simone Reed," Tasha said, tapping the article. "Some rich chick he dated after Maya. She's the source. Probably mad he moved on." Deja's stomach twisted. She wanted to call Caleb, demand answers, but before she could grab her phone, the bell jingled again. This time it was Jamal, striding in like he owned the place, his dreads pulled back and a scowl on his face. "Yo, what the hell is this?" he said, holding up his own copy of the magazine. "You running around with some white boy now?" "Get out," Deja snapped, her voice cracking. "You don't get to walk in here acting like you care." "I do care," Jamal shouted, stepping closer. "You're mine, Deja. Always been mine." She laughed, bitter and loud. "You lost that right when you fucked around with Keisha from your job. Get the hell out of my shop." He lunged forward, grabbing her arm, but before she could yank free, a fist connected with his jaw. Jamal stumbled back, and there was Caleb, bursting through the door, his knuckles red and his chest heaving. "Touch her again, and you're done," Caleb growled, standing between them like a wall. Jamal rubbed his jaw, glaring. "This ain't over, man." He stormed out, the bell clanging behind him. Deja turned on Caleb, her eyes blazing. "What the fuck are you doing here?" "I saw the magazine," he said, his voice tight. "I came to explain." "Explain what?" She cut him off, shoving the magazine into his chest. "That you're using me to get over her? That your ex is dragging me through the mud because you can't keep your shit together?" "It's not true," he said, grabbing her hands. "Simone's lying. She's pissed I ended things, and she's taking it out on you. I swear, Deja, you're not a rebound." She yanked her hands free, tears stinging her eyes. "I don't believe you. I can't." "Deja, please. Get out," she said, her voice breaking. "Both of y'all, just go." Tasha hesitated, but Deja waved her off. "I'm fine. Just leave." They did. Caleb with a last, pained look, Tasha with a muttered, "Call me." The shop fell silent, the weight of it crashing down on her. She locked the door, flipped the sign to closed, and sank to the floor behind the counter. Her hands shook as she pulled a stack of Caleb's letters from under the register, little notes he'd left her over the past few days, stupid things like, "You're tougher than you think, and dinner again soon." She tore them apart, piece by piece, then grabbed a lighter from the drawer. The flame flickered as she held it to the scraps, watching them curl and blacken in a metal trash can. The smoke stung her eyes, but she didn't care. She'd let herself hope, let herself feel, and now it was all ash. Jamal's betrayal had hurt, but this was worse. Because she'd started to trust Caleb, started to let him in, and it was all a lie. Outside, the rain picked up, drumming against the windows like it was mourning with her. She curled her knees to her chest, the cold floor biting through her jeans, and let the tears come. She was done. Done with men, done with love, done with all of it. The shop was her world now, her sanctuary, and she'd keep it that way. But as the fire died out, a tiny piece of paper fluttered free, unburned. She picked it up, her fingers trembling. 3 words in Caleb's messy scrawl. "I see you." She crumpled it in her fist, her sob echoing in the empty room, and threw it into the dark. The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. It battered the windows of Ebony Reed's like a drumbeat, turning Bronzeville into a blurry watercolor of gray and brown. Deja stood behind the counter, her braids pulled into a messy bun, her eyes rimmed red from too little sleep and too much thinking. The shop was quiet. No customers, no Miguel, just her and the ghosts of the last week rattling around in her head. The burned scraps of Caleb's notes were gone, swept into the trash along with the ashes of her trust. But she could still feel them, like phantom limbs itching under her skin. She hadn't seen him since Friday, when she'd kicked him out with Jamal's blood still fresh on his knuckles and that damn magazine tearing her apart. Tasha had called twice, left voicemails Deja didn't answer. Bessie had stopped by the apartment yesterday, taken one look at her granddaughter's hollow face and said, "Baby, you can't hide from this forever." But hiding was exactly what Deja wanted. Hiding from Caleb, from Jamal, from the mess she'd made of her own heart. The bell above the door jingled, sharp and unwelcome, and she flinched. She didn't look up, just kept sorting a stack of used kids' books, her fingers moving on autopilot. "We're closing in 10, she said, her voice flat. "Grab what you need quick." "Deja," a familiar voice said, low and rough, like it had been scraped over gravel. Her head snapped up, and there he was, Caleb Pierce, standing just inside the doorway, rain dripping off his black leather jacket onto the hardwood. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his gray eyes locked on her with an intensity that made her chest ache. He looked like hell, shadows under his eyes, stubble thicker than she'd seen it before. In his hands he held a small, leather-bound notebook, the same one he'd tried to give her at her apartment. "What you doing here?" she asked, her throat tight. She gripped the edge of the counter, nails digging into the wood. "I needed to see you," he said, stepping closer, his boots leaving wet tracks. "I've been trying to give you space, but I can't let it end like that." "There ain't nothing to end," she said, her voice cracking. "You saw the magazine. I saw it." "Everybody saw it. You're chasing a ghost and I ain't her." He shook his head, water flicking from his hair. "That's not true, and you know it." He set the notebook on the counter, sliding it toward her. "This was Maya's, her journal. I want you to read it." Deja stared at it, her stomach twisting. "Why?" "Because I need you to understand," he said, his voice breaking. "Yeah, you look like her. I won't lie about that. When I saw you at the gala, it hit me like a damn truck. But that's not why I kept coming back. It's not why I'm here now." She didn't touch the journal, just kept her eyes on him, searching for the lie. "Then why?" "Because you're you," he said, stepping around the counter, close enough that she could smell the rain on him, the faint cedar of his cologne. "You're stronger than she ever was. Realer. You don't bullshit. You don't play games. You walked into that ballroom like you didn't give a damn and I couldn't look away. Not because of her. Because of you." Her breath hitched, and she hated how his words sank into her, how they chipped away at the walls she'd built. "You don't know me, Caleb. Not really." "Then let me," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He knelt down in front of her, right there on the wet floor, his hands resting on his knees like he was begging. "I fucked up, Deja. I should have told you about Maya sooner, should have shut Simone down before she got to you. But I'm here now, and I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove it's you I see." She stared at him, her heart pounding so loud she was sure he could hear it. He looked ridiculous, kneeling in her shop like some knight in a fairy tale, but there was nothing fake in his eyes, just raw, messy truth. She'd spent 3 days drowning in doubt, convincing herself he was just another Jamal, another lie. But this was different. Scary as hell, but different. "Get up," she said finally, her voice shaky. "You look stupid down there." He stood, slow and careful, and she reached for the journal, her fingers brushing the worn leather. She didn't open it, not yet, but she held it, the weight of it grounding her. "If I do this," she said, meeting his gaze, "it don't mean we're good. It means I'm listening. That's it." "That's enough," he said, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "For now." She nodded, clutching the journal to her chest. "Come back tomorrow. I'll read it tonight." He didn't push, just gave her a small, tired smile and left, the bell jingling as the door swung shut. Deja sank onto the stool behind the counter, her hands trembling as she flipped open the cover. Maya's handwriting stared back at her, slanted, messy, full of life. She read the first entry, dated 5 years ago. "Met Caleb today. He's intense, but there's something about him, like he sees me when no one else does." Deja closed it, her throat burning. She'd read the rest later, alone, when the shop wasn't watching her like a judge. That night, curled up on her couch with a mug of tea, she devoured the journal page by page. Maya's words painted a picture of a woman who'd loved hard, laughed loud, and fought for everything she had. She wrote about Caleb, his quiet strength, his stubbornness, the way he'd sit with her in silence when she needed it. But she also wrote about her fears, her doubts, the car accident that ended it all in a single brutal sentence. "I'm scared I won't make it home tonight." When Deja finished, the tea was cold, and her face was wet with tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. Maya wasn't her, not even close. They looked alike, sure, but Deja was tougher, sharper, forged in a fire Maya hadn't known. And Caleb, he'd loved her, lost her, but he wasn't lying. He saw Deja, not a shadow. The next day, when he walked into Ebony Reed's, she was waiting. She didn't say anything, just led him to the back, past the counter, and into her apartment 2 blocks away. The rain had stopped, but the air still felt heavy, charged. She didn't invite him to sit, didn't offer him a drink. She just stood there, arms crossed, and said, "I read it." He nodded, hands in his pockets. And I believe you," she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "But I'm scared, Caleb. I'm scared to feel this. Scared you'll break me like he did." "I'm scared too," he admitted, stepping closer. "I haven't let anybody in since her. But you're worth it, Deja. I'm falling for you, and I don't want to stop." Her breath caught, and before she could talk herself out of it, she closed the distance, her hands fisting in his jacket as she kissed him. It was slow at first, tentative, a question more than a demand. He answered it, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her tight against him. The kiss deepened, heat building like a slow burn, and she felt it. The shift from fear to want, from doubt to something real. "Come with me," he murmured against her lips, his voice rough. "My place." She nodded, too caught up to argue, and 20 minutes later, they were in his penthouse downtown, the city sprawling out below them through floor-to-ceiling windows. The place was all sleek lines and dark wood, marble counters, leather couches, a view that screamed money. But Deja didn't care about that. She cared about the way Caleb looked at her as he shrugged off his jacket, his shirt pulling tight across his chest. They didn't make it to the bedroom. He backed her against the living room wall, his hands sliding under her sweater, fingers tracing the curve of her waist. She yanked his shirt open, buttons popping like gunfire, and he groaned as her nails raked down his chest. "Deja," he breathed, his mouth on her neck, teeth grazing her skin. She arched into him, her hands tugging at his belt, and he lifted her like she weighed nothing, pinning her against the wall. Her legs wrapped around his hips, the friction of her jeans against his sending sparks through her. He kissed her hard, desperate, his tongue tangling with hers as he pulled her sweater over her head, tossing it to the floor. Her bra followed, and she gasped as his mouth found her skin, hot and relentless. They stumbled to the floor, a mess of limbs and heat, clothes shedding like skin. She straddled him, her hands braced on his chest as she rocked against him, her breath coming in sharp, ragged bursts. He gripped her hips, guiding her, his eyes locked on hers like she was the only thing that mattered. It was wild, raw, a collision of everything they'd been holding back. She clawed at him, nails digging into his shoulders, and he growled her name, the sound pushing her over the edge. They moved together, hard and fast, the city lights blurring outside as the world narrowed to just them. When it was over, they collapsed, panting, tangled on the hardwood. Caleb pulled her close, his arm draping over her waist, and she let him, her head resting on his chest. His heartbeat thumped under her ear, steady and real, and for the first time in days, she felt safe. "I'm falling for you too," she whispered, so quiet she wasn't sure he heard. He did. He tightened his hold, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Don't fight it." She didn't, not then. They lay there, the silence wrapping around them like a blanket, and she let herself believe it could work. Over the next few weeks, they built something fragile but real. He'd show up at Ebony Reed's with coffee or a book he'd found. She'd cook him soul food at her place. Collards, cornbread, the works. They'd talk for hours about his past, her dreams, the way Bessie had shaped her into who she was. One night, over a plate of her fried chicken, he said, "I want to save this place." "Ebony Reed's?" she asked, wiping her hands on a napkin. "Yeah," he said, leaning back in her creaky kitchen chair. "The whole block, actually. I've got the money. I can buy it, put it in a trust. No one can touch it. Not ever. Keep it yours. Keep it safe." She stared at him, her fork halfway to her mouth. "You serious?" "Dead serious," he said, his eyes steady. "You love this place. I love seeing you in it. Let me do this." She didn't say yes right away, but the idea grew on her. They started planning, meetings with lawyers, calls to the city, blueprints for turning the shop into something more, a community hub with reading programs and poetry nights. Deja dug out her old notebooks, the ones she'd filled with stories as a kid, and started writing again, pouring herself into pages about hope, about them. For the first time since Jamal, she felt like she was building something good. Caleb wasn't perfect, but he was hers, and she was starting to think she could be his too. One afternoon, as they sat in the shop sketching ideas on a napkin, he reached for her hand across the counter. "We're good, right?" he asked, his voice soft. She squeezed his fingers, smiling. "Yeah, we're good." The bell jingled and she looked up, expecting a customer. It was Bessie, hobbling in with her cane, a grin splitting her face. "Well, look at y'all," she said, eyeing their linked hands. "Told you he was trouble, baby." Deja laughed, rolling her eyes. "Granny, hush." But Bessie just winked at Caleb. "You take care of my girl here?" "Yes, ma'am," he said, grinning back. For a moment it felt perfect, too perfect. And maybe that should have been her first clue that it wouldn't last. The air in Ebony Reed's carried a chill that didn't match the late spring sun filtering through the windows. Deja stood behind the counter, her hands busy sorting a stack of donated paperbacks, but her mind was miles away. It had been a month since that night in Caleb's penthouse, a month of stolen moments and quiet promises. They'd built something, tentative, messy, but real. He'd spent mornings at the shop with her, sketching plans to turn the block into a community anchor. Evenings at her place eating soul food she cooked while he told her stories of his scrappy Southside days. She'd started writing again, her notebooks filling with words she hadn't touched since Jamal broke her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was moving forward. The bell jingled, and she glanced up, expecting Caleb. He'd promised to swing by with coffee after a meeting downtown. But it wasn't him. Tasha stormed in, her leather jacket zipped tight, her braids swinging as she slapped a thick manila envelope onto the counter. Her eyes were hard, lips pressed into a thin line. "You need to look at this," Tasha said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Right now." Deja frowned, setting down a dog-eared copy of Invisible Man. "What's going on?" "Just open it," Tasha said, crossing her arms. "Ain't no easy way to say it." Deja's stomach twisted as she tore the envelope open, pulling out a sheaf of papers, legal documents, emails, grainy photos. Her eyes scanned the top page, a memo stamped with the logo of Pierce Ventures, dated 6 years back. Words jumped out at her. Layoffs, minority workers, cost-cutting measures, approved by C. Pierce. There were names, dozens of them, mostly black and Latino, people who'd lost their jobs when Caleb's first company streamlined operations. Attached emails showed him signing off, cold and clinical, like it was nothing. "What the hell is this?" Deja asked, her voice trembling as she flipped through more. Pay stubs, termination notices, a photo of a picket line outside a warehouse, signs reading "Justice for Workers." "It's the truth," Tasha said, leaning forward. "Your boy ain't the saint he's playing. My cousin works at the Tribune. Dug this up after that magazine shit. Simone Reed leaked it, saying he buried it to keep his image clean." Deja's hands shook, the papers crinkling under her grip. "This can't be right. He wouldn't—" "He did," Tasha cut in. "He knew, Deja. Signed the damn orders. Fired folks like us, black folks, brown folks, just to make a quick buck. And now he's got you thinking he's some kind of savior?" She wanted to argue, to shove the papers back and call it lies, but the evidence stared her down, cold and unyielding. Her chest tightened, a familiar ache creeping in, the same one she'd felt when she caught Jamal with Keisha, when she'd realized everything she'd believed was a sham. She dropped the stack, stepping back like it burned her. "I need to talk to him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Tasha nodded, her expression softening just a fraction. "You do that, but don't let him sweet-talk you out of this. You deserve better." The door swung open again before Deja could respond, and there he was, Caleb, 2 cups of coffee in hand, his leather jacket speckled with drizzle. He froze when he saw Tasha, then Deja's face, the papers scattered on the counter like a crime scene. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting the cups down, his voice tight with worry. Deja didn't speak, just grabbed the top memo and shoved it into his chest. "Explain this." He took it, his eyes scanning the page, and she watched the color drain from his face. "Deja. Don't Deja me," she snapped, her voice rising. "Did you do this? Did you fire all them people, black people, my people, just to pad your damn pockets?" He swallowed hard, his jaw clenching. "It was a long time ago. My first company. I was young, stupid. The board pushed for cuts, and I didn't fight it. I signed off. I didn't think—" "You didn't think?" She cut him off, her hands balling into fists. "You didn't think about the folks who lost everything? Families like mine, struggling to eat, while you sat back and got rich?" "I was wrong," he said, stepping closer, his voice breaking. "I know that now. I've been trying to make it right, donating, setting up programs." "Bullshit!" she shouted, tears stinging her eyes. "You knew, Caleb. You knew, and you didn't say nothing. You let me think you were different. But you're just like the rest of them, using folks like me till you don't need us no more." "That's not true," he said, reaching for her. "I love you, Deja. I'd never—" "Don't you dare!" she hissed, slapping his hand away. "You don't get to say that. Not now. I hate you. I hate you for this." He flinched like she'd hit him, his eyes wide with pain. "Please, just listen. Get out," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm done." He didn't move at first, just stood there, breathing hard, like he was trying to find the words to fix it. But there weren't any. Tasha stepped forward, her hand on Deja's shoulder. "You hurt her. Go." Caleb nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and then he was gone, the bell clanging behind him like a gunshot. Deja sank onto the stool, her hands trembling as she pressed them to her face. Tasha knelt beside her, rubbing her back. "You okay?" "No," Deja said, her voice muffled. "I ain't been okay in a long time." She thought that was the worst of it, thought the ache in her chest couldn't get deeper. She was wrong. An hour later, she was locking up the shop when Jamal showed up, leaning against the street lamp outside like a damn vulture. His dreads were loose, his hoodie soaked from the drizzle, and his eyes glinted with something dark. "Yo, Deja," he called, pushing off the pole. "Heard your boy's in deep shit." "Leave me alone, Jamal," she said, fumbling with the keys, her hands still shaky from crying. He didn't. He stepped closer, too close, and grabbed her arm. "You think he's better than me, huh? That white boy's playing you, and you're too dumb to see it." "Let go," she said, yanking back, but his grip tightened. "Nah," he sneered. "You're mine, always been mine." She didn't think, just swung. Her fist connected with his cheek, and he stumbled, cursing. "I said let go," she shouted, her voice raw. He lunged again, lips crashing into hers, and she shoved him hard, her knee slamming into his groin. He doubled over, gasping, and she stumbled back, wiping her mouth like she could erase it. "Stay the hell away from me," she spat, and ran, her keys jangling as she bolted to her apartment 2 blocks away. She locked the door, slid down it, and sobbed, her whole body shaking. Jamal's touch lingered like poison, mixing with the betrayal from Caleb until she couldn't breathe. She didn't leave the apartment for 2 days. The blinds stayed shut, the phone went unanswered, Tasha's calls, Bessie's texts, even a voicemail from Caleb she deleted without listening. She sat on the couch, staring at the wall, the cold chicken from that night still rotting on the table. Her chest felt hollow, scooped out by every man who'd ever promised her something and lied. On the 3rd day, Bessie showed up, banging on the door till Deja let her in. The old woman took one look at her, puffy eyes, unwashed hoodie, braids a mess, and pulled her into a hug that smelled like lavender and home. "Baby, what happened?" Bessie asked, her voice soft but firm, the kind that didn't take no for an answer. Deja broke, spilling it all. The papers, Caleb's confession, Jamal's attack. Bessie listened, rocking her gently, then pulled back, her hands on Deja's shoulders. "Love's messy, child," she said. "Always has been. You gotta look at his heart, not just his mistakes. But you don't owe him nothing till you're ready." "I don't know if he's got a heart left to give," Deja said, her voice small. "I thought he was different." "Maybe he is," Bessie said. "Maybe he ain't. That's yours to figure out." Deja didn't answer, just buried her face in Bessie's shoulder, letting the tears come again. When Bessie left, she felt a little steadier, not whole, but not shattered. She went back to the shop that afternoon, needing the routine, the safety of her books. Caleb was waiting when she got there, sitting on the stoop outside, his leather jacket crumpled like he'd slept in it. He stood when he saw her, his eyes red-rimmed, his voice hoarse. "I've been here all night," he said. "I couldn't leave without trying one more time." She stopped, keys dangling in her hand. "What you want, Caleb?" "To fix this," he said, stepping closer. I quit Pierce Ventures. Gave it all up, sold my shares, donated every damn cent to a fund for those workers. I can't undo what I did, but I can make it right. For them. For you. Her breath caught, a flicker of something, hope, maybe, stirring in her chest. Why? Because I love you, he said, his voice breaking. I'd give up everything for you, Deja. I already have. She stared at him, the rain starting again, soft and steady. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, his fingers warm against her cold skin. I don't know if I can trust you, she said, tears mixing with the drizzle on her face. I'll wait, he said, his thumb brushing her knuckles. However long it takes. They went inside, shutting out the rain, and sat on the floor between the poetry shelves. He didn't push, didn't ask for more, just held her hand, his head resting against the wall. She leaned into him, her cheek on his shoulder, and they stayed like that, silent, the weight of his words sinking in. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself fall again. His heartbeat thumped under her ear, steady and real, and she clung to it, a lifeline in the storm. I want to believe you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He turned his head, pressing his forehead to hers. Then let me show you. For a moment, it felt like enough. Like they could rebuild, piece by piece. She tightened her grip on his hand, tears slipping down her cheeks, and let herself hope. Just a little. Then the bell jingled, and everything shattered. 2 cops burst in, badges flashing, voices barking. Caleb Pierce, you're under arrest for defamation and falsifying records. Simone Reed's pressing charges. Deja jolted back, her hand slipping from his as they yanked him up, cuffing his wrists. What the hell? She shouted, scrambling to her feet. It's a lie, Caleb said, twisting to look at her, his eyes wild. She's setting me up. I'll fix this, Deja, I swear. Save it, one cop snapped, shoving him toward the door. The other grabbed his arm and they dragged him out, the bell clanging like a death knell. Deja stood frozen, the shop spinning around her. He was gone, taken, just like that. She sank to her knees, her breath coming in gasps, and the hope she'd clung to crumbled into dust. That night, she didn't go home. She stayed at Ebony Reed's, pulling every book Caleb had ever touched from the shelves. Poetry he'd shelved, novels he'd brought her, even a damn coffee-stained receipt he'd left behind. She piled them in the metal trash can behind the counter, her hands shaking as she struck a match. The flame caught, licking at the pages, and she watched them burn, the smoke curling up like all her broken dreams. She didn't cry this time. She just sat there, the fire's heat stinging her face, and let the emptiness take her. Bessie's words echoed in her head, look at his heart, but she couldn't see it anymore. All she saw was ash and the sinking feeling that she'd lost him for good. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing away whatever was left. The ashes in the trash can behind Ebony Reed's had long gone cold, but the smell of burnt paper lingered, clinging to the air like a ghost Deja couldn't shake. It had been a week since the cops dragged Caleb out in handcuffs, a week since she'd watched everything she'd dared to hope for turn to smoke. The shop felt emptier now, the shelves bare where she'd ripped out his books, the silence heavier than it had ever been. She moved through her days like a shadow, opening the store, shelving what little stock came in, closing up without a word to anyone. Tasha stopped by once, left a plate of jerk chicken she didn't eat. Bessie called, her voice crackling through the line with worry, but Deja brushed her off with a mumbled, I'm fine. She wasn't fine. She was hollowed out, a shell of the woman who'd laughed with Caleb over fried wings, who'd let herself fall in his penthouse, who'd believed he could be more than another lie. Simone's charges, defamation, falsified records, played on a loop in her head, the news buzzing with it like flies on a corpse. Caleb Pierce, tech mogul turned pariah, locked up downtown while his lawyers scrambled. Deja didn't watch the reports, didn't read the headlines. She didn't need to. The truth was etched into her bones. She'd trusted him, and it had cost her everything. The bell jingled late that Tuesday, the sound jarring in the stillness. Deja didn't look up from the counter where she was scribbling inventory notes on a legal pad, her handwriting shaky from too much coffee and too little sleep. "We're closed," she said, her voice flat. "Come back tomorrow." "Deja, it's me," a voice said, soft and hesitant. She froze, her pen hovering over the page. Miguel stood in the doorway, his hoodie pulled low, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He hadn't been around since the arrest, called in sick, left her to handle the shop alone. She'd figured he was dodging the drama, but the way he shifted now, eyes darting like a trapped animal, told her something else. "What you want, Miguel?" she asked, setting the pen down, her tone sharp. "Ain't seen you in days." He stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind him. "I gotta tell you something. It's bad." Her stomach dropped, a cold dread creeping up her spine. "Spit it out." He took a deep breath, his hands trembling as he pulled them from his pockets. "It was me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I gave Simone the papers, the ones about the layoffs." Deja stared at him, the words sinking in slow, like poison seeping into her veins. "What?" "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, rushing now, his eyes wide. "She came to me a month ago. Simone said she needed dirt on Caleb, offered me cash. I was pissed, Deja. You and him, he was always around, and I liked you, okay? I've liked you forever, and he just swooped in. You did this 'cause you were jealous?" She cut in, her voice rising, raw with disbelief. "You tanked my life 'cause you couldn't handle me moving on? It wasn't supposed to blow up like this," he shouted, stepping closer. "I gave her the old files, thought she'd just use it to mess with him, not you. Then she kept pushing, got me to dig more, and I didn't know she'd go after you too. I'm sorry, Deja, I swear." "Get out," she said, her voice low, dangerous. "Get the fuck out of my shop." "Deja, please." "Now!" she screamed, grabbing a book from the counter and hurling it at him. It hit the wall beside his head, pages fluttering, and he flinched, backing toward the door. "I didn't mean it," he mumbled, then bolted, the bell clanging as he disappeared into the dusk. She sank to the floor, her knees hitting the hardwood with a dull thud. Miguel, quiet, reliable Miguel, had betrayed her. Not Caleb, not entirely. The realization twisted in her gut, a mix of relief and rage she didn't know what to do with. She'd burned his books, shut him out, and all along, it had been someone else pulling the strings. But Caleb had still signed those papers, still let it happen. That wasn't a lie, even if Simone had weaponized it. She didn't know how long she sat there, the shop growing dark around her, when the bell jingled again. This time, she looked up and her breath caught. Caleb stood there, his leather jacket rumpled, his face gaunt like he hadn't slept in days. His hands were free, no cuffs, and his gray eyes found hers, soft and desperate. "They let me out," he said, his voice hoarse. "Lawyers got the charges dropped. Simone's story fell apart. I came straight here." She stood slowly, her legs shaky, and crossed her arms over her chest. "Miguel told me," she said, her voice trembling. "He gave her the papers." Caleb's jaw tightened, a flash of anger crossing his face. "I'll deal with him." "No," she cut in. "You don't get to play hero, not after everything." He stepped closer, stopping when she flinched. "I know I fucked up, Deja. I should have told you about the layoffs, should have owned it from the start, but I meant what I said. I gave it all up. The company, the money, everything. It's gone, and I don't care, 'cause the only thing I want is you." Her throat burned, tears pricking her eyes. "You don't get it, Caleb. I can't keep doing this. Every time I let you in, it falls apart." "I'll fix it," he said, his voice breaking. "I'll wait. I'll fight. Whatever it takes. I love you, Deja. No ghosts, no lies. Just us." She wanted to believe him. God, she did. He looked so broken, standing there with nothing left but his words, and it tore at her. She stepped forward, her hand reaching for his, and he took it, his fingers curling around hers like a lifeline. They sank to the floor together, sitting between the shelves, his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, her cheek against his chest, and for a moment it felt like it could be enough. Just this, just them. "I don't know if I can trust you," she whispered, her voice raw. "But I want to try." He pressed his lips to her forehead, a soft, trembling touch. "That's all I need." They sat there, the shop wrapping around them like a cocoon, and she let herself breathe, let herself hope again. His heartbeat thumped under her ear, steady and real, and she clung to it, a fragile thread in the dark. But hope never lasted long. 2 days later, she was at the shop, restocking a shelf of poetry, when Tasha burst in, her face pale, a tablet in her hand. "Deja, you gotta see this," she said, her voice shaking. Deja took it, her heart sinking as she read the headline on Chicago Pulse. Caleb Pierce caught on tape, racist rant or revenge. Below it, a video link. She tapped it, and Caleb's voice crackled through the speakers, distorted but clear. "She's just another black chick I picked up to feel something. Nothing special." The clip cut off, leaving silence like a guillotine. "It's fake," Tasha said, grabbing her arm. "Simone's behind it. My cousin says she's got tech guys who can doctor anything, but it's everywhere, Deja. Twitter, the news, people believe it." Deja's hands shook, the tablet slipping to the counter. "He wouldn't say that," she murmured, but doubt gnawed at her, sharp and relentless. She'd heard his voice, seen the way he'd looked at her. Could it all be a lie? Before she could process it, the bell jingled again. Jamal stormed in, his eyes wild, a smirk twisting his lips. "Told you," he said, stepping close. "He's trash, Deja. You're better off with me." "Get out," she said, her voice trembling. But he didn't listen. He grabbed her shoulders, pulling her toward him, and she shoved him back, her nails digging into his arms. "Stop it!" Tasha shouted, yanking him away. But the damage was done. Deja stumbled back, her breath coming in gasps, the shop spinning around her. That night she sat in her apartment, the blinds shut tight, the tablet glowing on the table. The video had gone viral. Hundreds of thousands of views, comments calling Caleb a fraud, a racist, a user. Ebony Reed's was trending too, tagged as the rebound spot, with threats to boycott it, burn it down. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Simone had won. Whether the tape was fake or not, the world believed it, and it was tearing them apart. Caleb showed up at dawn, banging on her door till she let him in. He looked like a wreck, hair wild, eyes bloodshot, a single white rose in his hand. "It's not me," he said, his voice raw. "She faked it. I've got people working on it, proving it's a lie. I'd never say that, Deja, never." She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her hoodie swallowing her frame. "I want to believe you," she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "But I don't know anymore. Every time I try, it's something else. Jamal, Simone, the world. I can't keep losing myself for you." I'll fix it, he said, stepping closer, the rose trembling in his grip. I'll fight for us. Then fight, she said, her voice breaking. But I need space. I can't do this right now. He nodded, his shoulders slumping, and set the rose on her table. I'll wait, he whispered, then left, the door clicking shut behind him. She didn't touch the rose, just sat there, staring at it as the sun rose, painting the room in shades of gray. The shop was her sanctuary, her life, and now it was a target. Caleb was her heart, her hope, and now he was a question mark. She didn't know what to feel, didn't know who to trust. So she wrote, poured it all into a story, a raw, jagged thing about love and betrayal and a woman who didn't know how to stand up again. She sent it to a small press she'd found online, not expecting much, just needing to let it go. 3 weeks later, the story hit the internet. A blog picked it up, then a news site, then Twitter. The escort in blue, they called it, her words spreading like wildfire. People read it, shared it, saw the truth in it. Simone's lies unraveled, her tech guy confessing to the fake tape for a plea deal. Caleb's name cleared, piece by piece, the tide turning slow but sure. She was at Ebony Reed's, sweeping the floor, when he came back. The bell jingled, and there he was, clean-shaven now, a new rose in his hand, his eyes soft but guarded. He didn't step inside, just stood in the doorway, the late afternoon sun framing him like a painting. I saw your story, he said, his voice steady. It's beautiful. You're beautiful. She leaned on the broom, her heart thudding. You're free? Yeah, he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. They dropped it all. I'm done with that life. Sold what's left. Walked away. I just want to be with you, Deja. However you'll have me. She wanted to run to him, to fall into his arms and let it all go. But she couldn't. Not yet. I need time, she said, her voice small. I love you, Caleb, but I don't know what that means anymore. He nodded, setting the rose on the threshold. I'll be here, he said, then turned and walked away, his figure shrinking down the street, disappearing into the rain that had started falling again. She watched him go, her chest aching, and picked up the rose, its petals soft against her fingers. She didn't know if she'd call him, didn't know if they'd find their way back. The shop stood quiet around her, a battered haven she'd fight to keep, no matter what. That night, a letter slipped under her apartment door. No stamp, just her name in neat script. She opened it, her hands trembling, and found a single page from a clinic downtown. Pregnancy test, positive, estimated 8 weeks. Her breath stopped, her mind racing back. Jamal's kiss outside the shop, Caleb's nights with her. She didn't know whose it was, didn't know how to find out. She stepped onto her tiny balcony, the rose still in her hand, and looked out at the city, the lights blurring through her tears. Caleb was out there, somewhere, walking away with his own scars. She pressed a hand to her stomach, a faint smile breaking through the pain, and whispered, "What the hell now?" The rain kept falling, the story unfinished, the answers lost in the dark.